Hey, what's going on? Daniel Betancourt with Team Betancourt, teambetancourt.com. Today I'm going to be going over how to write an offer using the transaction desk system. So transaction desk is one of the resources that is included with the Stellar MLS membership. So here in Central Florida, I'm a member of Stellar MLS. It's the primary MLS system for Central Florida. Transaction desk is included with that membership. And so I'm going to choose a random listing, and I'm going to show you how I write up an offer and how I get it signed through the Authentisign system. Authentisign is it's a system that's part of the transaction desk system. So Authentisign is an optional program that you can purchase. It works. It's owned by the transaction desk company. Forget their name, Insta something or other. But Authentisign is owned by Transaction Desk. It costs $50 to $100 per year to use Authentisign. And if you use Transaction Desk, they work very well and nicely, seamlessly with each other. They're also integrated very well with Stellar MLS. So it makes it really easy to submit offers when you use Transaction Desk from Stellar. So here we go. This one here, 7702 Sundial Lane. This is just a random listing that I chose. I don't know anyone associated with this listing. And I'm just going to show you the process. And all of the terms that I discuss in this offer, they're all imaginary. We're imagining that I've already discussed these with my imaginary buyer, and everybody's in agreement, and I'm going to send them off. All right, so the first step, right now I'm in Stellar MLS. I'm looking at the listing. This is a broker synopsis, so I can see all of the broker information at the bottom. The first step that you do is you go to this icon here that says Transaction Desk. When you hover over it, it says Transaction Desk. It's a TD icon. So you click on that. That's going to open up Transaction Desk, and what it will also do is import the information from Stellar into Transaction Desk associated with that listing. So what it's doing now, it's creating a transaction. So I can name this transaction. I'm just going to name it 7702 Sundial Lane example. So I remember to delete this later. And the template. You can create templates for different purposes. So I have templates here for buyers, for coming soon listings, for condo listing packages, for agents that desire to join Team Betancourt, and for traditional listings. So these are packages, these are transaction packages that I've created that have all of the required documents for these different purposes already packaged together. So if I choose one of these, then it'll just create a transaction with that associated package. But because most people don't have that set up, I'm not going to choose a template. The type of transaction is the next option. This will be a residential sale. It's not a listing, so it's a sale, and it's going to import data from Stellar MLS. It already sensed the MLS ID and add me as the selling agent. So the options here are the listing agent, selling agent, neither, or both. So in this imaginary scenario, I'm the selling agent. And you can always click on this use the wizard, which it kind of walks you step by step through the process of creating an offer. Okay, so once we've decided on all this, we click create. So this creates a new transaction in the transaction desk system. So this is the wizard. So right now in the wizard, we're on step 1 of 5 of writing an offer. And so step 1 is the detail section. You don't really have to fill out all of these sections, because as you get into writing the offer, you can go into each of the forms and complete the terms there. So here, you can complete all this: purchase price, deposit amount, additional deposit. But I will normally wait until I get into the contract to do that. So this has the basic details, the property address, and the legal description, tax ID, etc. And step number 2 are the transaction dates. So the transaction dates, again, you can type in here the expiration date, the offer date, offer expiration date, all of these dates, but it might be confusing to you if you're not familiar with the system. You might not know some of these things sound kind of similar, expiration date and offer expiration date. So it might be better off just to skip this step 2 and do it in the form while you're able to edit the form. The next step of the wizard is creating contacts. So here we have, it has the listing broker, which is Coldwell Banker. It has the listing agent here. It has me as a selling agent, eXp Realty as the selling broker. I'm going to add an imaginary buyer name. So create new transaction contact. Okay, what type of a contact is this? This is a buyer contact. And the name, we're going to call this person John Doe. That's really original. So John Doe is my buyer. I bet there are some John Does out there too, by the way, that are wondering why their parents named them that. But John Doe is buyer number 1, and his email, coincidentally, is john@doe.com. Looks like I've used this one before. Looks like he's a repeat customer. So john@doe.com. I don't have to do anything else. See, the first name is required, the last name is required, the email is necessary for the electronic signatures, but it's beneficial, but it's not a requirement. The legal name, sometimes if you're having someone who's signing the paperwork, but their legal name is something different, you would type in their different legal name here. So for example, John Doe might be the trustee of the Doe Trust number 5. So over here, I would write legal name Doe Trust number 5, but I would have John Doe's name here because he's the one that I'll be sending the documents to sign. So legal name, if it's different than the person's name or the entity's name, you would type it in there. But in this case, we're just going with John Doe. Preferred signature. So, you might have John Bartholomew Doe. He doesn't go by Bartholomew, as a whole middle name. So preferred signature, you can type in here John B. Doe, and wherever it imports the name, it's going to use the preferred signature rather than the correct name. And preferred initials you can do as well. So you can come up with different examples for that, but JD are going to be the initials for John Doe, but if for some reason he preferred JBD for John Bartholomew Doe, then you would put JBD here. But we're just going to leave that blank because it'll just use the basics with John Doe. It'll use JD in the future. Do I want to add this person to the address book? Yes, I do. All right, so here you can add his address if you wanted to, but we're going to skip that step. It's not really required, so we won't use that. So we're going to save that. John Doe buyer. Okay, well, we want to add his wife as buyer number 2. So create new contact name. This is going to be a buyer. What do you think buyer number 2's name should be? Let me think about it. How about Samantha? Threw you for a loop there. Samantha Doe. We're going to do Samantha Doe, and she is Samantha@doe.com. All right, so that is buyer number 2. I have 2 dots in there. So did you see that it was telling me it was an invalid email because I had 2 dots in there. Samantha@doe.com. She's buyer number 2. Same things apply. Legal name, preferred signature. We're going to leave that blank for this purpose. Save. So here we have listing broker, selling agent, selling broker, listing agent, buyer, and the other buyer. So we can add, what you can do is when you go into the MLS, you're looking at this listing and you want to get the seller's names. So the seller's names aren't always disclosed in the listing, and they're not always disclosed properly. Sometimes they say could be you or some silliness. So one way that I get the seller name is clicking on the tax ID here in the MLS. When you click on that, it will take you to the seller's name. So here's the seller's name, Ellen Palmer. Sorry for using you in this example. We're going to I copied that. What I did, I highlighted it and I copied it so I can paste it here into this step. So contact, I'm adding a new contact here, add, and we're going to create a new contact. This contact is the seller. And I'm just going to paste it there, Ellen Palmer, right? So Ellen is the first name, M is the middle name, Palmer is the last name. So because she's a seller and she's not my customer, I'm not sending anything to her for signatures, so I don't need her email address, and I don't need any of this other information. It's just doing this so it can import it into the forms on Transaction Desk. Sometimes I will tell you that Transaction Desk will import the seller name from the public records on the MLS, but sometimes it has last name first, so you'll have to switch it around. So it would have been possible that Ellen Palmer was already here, and it would have said Palmer Ellen, usually when it does import it, and then I have to correct it. But since there was nothing, I added the seller name, which was good for this example that I'm doing. So the next step number 4 of 5 here, you see step number 4 of 5. So step number 4 of 5 is to add the forms that we're going to be using for this transaction. I'm going fast here because this is a video and you can rewatch it. So you can pause and go back and watch anything that I say again, but I'm trying to not make this a 2-hour long video. So check it out. Forms. To add a form that we'll be using, we click on this plus button, add. So add forms. Now it's going to ask which forms do we want to add. So in this scenario, this home is, we're going to use the as is contract. So in the search bar, you can type as is, and it'll give you some forms that are associated with that search. So what we're looking for is the as is contract for sale and purchase. This is the contract that we want to use, and that's it related to as is. So I can search for something else in here also. Some of you who know how to do something like this are saying maybe the HOA disclosure, and that's right. I can look up a homeowner association. Here it is, the CR5X. So first of all, wanted to go back. The as-is contract is the far bar as-is contract. So whenever we're using any riders or addenda, we want to make sure that we're using the associated rider, like a far bar. See down here it says far bar. This would be the far bar homeowners association disclosure. This listing agent thankfully had the HOA disclosure signed by the seller already in the attachments, so I'm going to use that instead of using a brand new form that would be blank. So we won't be using any other riders, but some examples of riders that you need sometimes are the lead-based paint if the home was built before 1978, a homeowners association disclosure, condo association disclosure, CDD disclosure sometimes. So there are, if you go into the far bar residential contract and addenda, you'll see a whole long, list of optional addenda that you can use, and riders, defective drywall, FHA. Let's use FHA because that's a common one. So my buyer's an FHA buyer now. So we're going to choose that FHA rider, and we're going to add that. But before I do that, just wanted to show you there are lots of different riders here. Most of them we don't use on a regular basis, but FHA is a common one, so I'll use that one for this example. I'm going to add those two attachments, which are the as-is contract and the FHA VA rider. Next step is, in this step, in the wizard, I'm on step 4. If I click next, it's going to take me to step 5, which are the steps are also here. You've got the details, the contacts, the forms. The next step after forms would be to add documents. So documents are not realtor forms. They might be disclosures that my brokerage requires. Speaking of that, I'm going to go if I want to add a third form from the realtor provided forms, I'm going to click add, and my brokerage EXP requires the wire fraud notice, wire fraud prevention notice. So I just typed in wire in the search bar, popped up this document. I know I need that. I'm adding that one. So these are the three documents. These are the three forms that we're using in this transaction. So with Transaction Desk, anything called a form is one that was pre-written by the Realtor Association, FAR/BAR, MLS, any of those forms that we use. The document section would be for things that your brokerage or your broker created, that they require you to get these things signed, but they're not forms that were created by the Realtor Association or the MLS. So the next step, now that we have these three forms, I'm going to complete the as-is contract. So I'm clicking on the as-is contract link, which will open up the contract. And here we are, as-is contract. It has here the seller, Ellen M. Palmer, the buyers, John Doe and Samantha Doe, but there's no and. You have to click this down arrow to click on and. So now it just added and in there. And when it prints, even though you can't see the D here, it's going to appropriate the font size. Street address, it has the property address, it has the property ID, it has the legal description. If you're familiar with this contract, the next blank, as realtors, what we do is fill in the blanks. The next blank is personal property. So the contract already includes range, refrigerator, dishwasher, disposal, ceiling fans, intercom, light fixtures, drapery rods, blinds, window treatment, smoke detectors, garage door opener, security gates, and other devices, storm shutters, panels. So that's all personal property. But here we would type in other personal property. So you notice in that list, they didn't mention washer dryer. So my buyer wants to ask for the washer and dryer. So I type in here washer and dryer. The microwave is not listed here ever. Usually the microwaves are mounted, so you assume that they're included. But let's say to be safe, we want to write in here microwave just to make sure that it's in there. The ring doorbell, or any camera doorbell, but it's mounted to the house. So technically it should be included, but some people like to go back and forth about what's included, what's not. Let's just type in here to be safe, ring doorbell. Let's type in here to be extra safe, the shed and backyard. These are things that there are disputes over, believe it or not, periodically. The next line, the following items are excluded from the purchase. So these are things that the seller might have put into the realtor remarks. These certain pieces of the house are not included with the sale. So they might say the ceiling fan in the Florida room. Ceiling fan in a Florida room. It's emotional attachment, and I'm taking that with me. Okay, fine. Write it into the contract, because the contract's what dictates the transaction, not the MLS description, not the realtor remarks, not a phone call or a text message. What's in this purchase agreement, once everyone agrees to it, this is what governs the transaction. So ceiling fan in the Florida room, we're going to exclude that. That's not included. All right, so purchase price. So we're going to write in here the purchase price. They're asking $375. It's a competitive market, so we're going to offer them full price, $375. The next line, initial deposit to be held. This is how much of a deposit the buyer wants to submit an offer. So $375,000 is the purchase price. Let's say I think $5,000 would make our offer really attractive. So $5,000 deposit. This deposit is due within how many days of the contract being accepted, assuming the contract gets accepted. I click on here. It says if left blank, then 3. Well, we could leave it blank and assume 3, or we can just be safe and just check this box and say 3, just to be sure that we don't leave anything to someone else's determination. Okay, who's going to be the escrow agent? Who's holding this deposit? So this doesn't always mean the closing company who's closing the transaction. It means who's holding this deposit, which typically is the closing agent. So the escrow agent in our Stellar MLS now they've recently added where the listing agent can uh, type into the listing who they want the closing agent to be. So here it is, Tammy Randall. I'm just going to copy all this stuff. Control C. All right. So if I were to do if I were to paste it here, there's not enough space to do it all. So my little trick that I do, I go up here to the following items are excluded, and I paste it here because it's a nice big line. And then I take the name, and then I type it in here. So this is Sunbelt Title. I paste it there. Their address is here, 7604 Sand Lake Road. Copy, Control C, paste. Sand Lake Road, I guess I didn't copy it all. There, Orlando, Florida, 32819. Okay, Orlando, Florida, 32819. Okay, what's their phone number? Here it is. Phone number. I cut it, not copy it. Control X, Control V to paste it. The email, here's the email address, sandlake@sunbelt. Control C or Control X, Control V to paste it. Fax number for anyone who's still using a fax machine. Control X, paste it. I have all the information now for the closing agent. So what I can do here is now delete this whole line because I don't need that. And there it is, Sunbelt Title, Sand Lake Road, all the information is there. They're offering $375. They're giving a $5,000 deposit. The next question that we normally fill out here is the financing. How much of a loan amount are the buyers getting or using? So you can express this in a dollar amount or you can express it in a percentage amount. So I like to do the percentage. So it's a FHA. So FHA requires 3.5% down. So that means it's a 96.5% loan amount, right? So 96.5% loan amount, which means if you take the purchase price minus the deposit minus the loan amount of 96.5%, now you've got what the balance to close is. $8,125 is what the buyer is responsible for bringing on the closing day, plus their closing costs. The next step is the time for acceptance. Okay, so people confuse this with the response date. You can call it a response date, but this is basically the offer expiration date. So if not signed by buyer and seller, then this offer expires. So today is April 5th, right? So I'm just going to give them 2 days, April 7th, 2021. Okay, April 7th, 2021. Or you can actually choose it here, April 7th, 2021. This is for time, okay? I don't always put a time, but you can say 5 p.m. April 7th, 2021 at 5 p.m. After that, this offer expires. This does not mean that the seller is obligated to give the buyer a response by this date. So it's not like a required response date. It's an offer expiration date. Just want to be clear about that. Okay, so the next step is the closing date. So the closing date, we will determine. Let's make it 30 days after the acceptance date. So, okay, we're going to look on the calendar, click on the calendar icon. We're in April here. We're going to go to the next month, which is May, and we're going to choose May 7th. That gives 30 days. I usually give 35 to be safe. We can always close a few days early, but to make it easy, let's go with May 7th, 2021. All right, so the next step will be we're just going to scroll down and we're looking for boxes that we're supposed to check or not check and blanks that we're supposed to fill in or not. So check if the property is subject to lease. It's not. Assignability, this is what's usually chosen. Buyer may not assign this contract. Financing, Is the buyer paying cash? No, the buyer is getting the loan. So this contract is contingent upon the buyer obtaining approval. So you check that box. Approval of what? A conventional loan? No, FHA loan. Okay. The loan within 30 days. So we have a 30-day loan contingency, loan approval contingency on this contract. For the purpose of this example, we'll leave it that way. We'll check the check box for fixed rate mortgage. We'll leave this one blank, which is what the interest rate is prevailing if left blank. We'll leave this blank, which is 30-year financing if left blank. So we'll just call it 30-year. And buyer shall make mortgage loan application within 5 days. Usually the buyer's already done mortgage loan application to get a pre-approval, but it's fine. That's just in there. Okay, so you scroll down, and since we've chosen B, these are the financing options. You have financing options. A is cash, B is with a loan, and then you have these other options that we very rarely ever choose: assumption of an existing mortgage, or purchase money note, a purchase money note and mortgage to the seller. So that would be seller held financing. Over here is an estimate or summary of closing costs that are traditionally paid by each party. Costs to be paid by the seller, costs to be paid by the buyer. Sometimes if your buyer needs closing cost assistance, you get a lot of agents, they type it in here, which I'm not a fan of that because that area is often overlooked. I feel like the better place to type it is on page 11 where it's more clear, or on a separate addendum. But I feel like, some agents type it in there, and that's fine. Just be sure to look at all the lines when you're presenting offers to your sellers. I just prefer it to be more clear in a more conspicuous place. So closing costs to be paid by buyer, you would have this here. If your company charges a transaction fee, you would disclose it here in this line. Okay, the next step is title evidence. Next step in this contract process, we're going to choose here, seller shall designate closing agent. So the tradition here in Central Florida, seller designates the closing agent. So you always check that box. On rare occasion, the buyer might request to select the showing the closing agent, but it's rare. The next line. So first of all, on this, check one. So you're either checking I, or I. 1, 2, or 3. Next blank that we have to deal with is a home warranty. Does the buyer want to request the seller pay for a home warranty, or does the buyer want a home warranty that they will pay for? So in this scenario, we're just going to, for the sake of this example, say the seller is going to pay a home warranty plan issued by Old Republic not to exceed $600. The next one here, seller shall pay installments due. This talks about special assessments. Seller shall pay installments due prior to closing. And buyer shall pay installments due after closing, or the seller shall pay the assessments in full prior to or before closing. So some communities have special assessments. For example, I've sold in communities, not new construction, but one that's coming to mind is an older community that when they built the community, they put up a wooden fence around the entire community, but there was no HOA in this community. So when you have no HOA fees, there's no money to replace the fence when it starts deteriorating. So in this specific community, the county stepped in and they tore down the fence and built a wall, a pretty concrete block wall all the way around the community. And because there are no HOA fees to pay for it, they charge the homeowners by using a special assessment. And the special assessment might be something like every homeowner will have to contribute $300 per year as part of their property taxes until this expense is paid off to the county. And so if the seller sells it and there's still 2 years left before that's paid off, then the buyer will assume those special assessment payments in the future. Um, so this is saying, do we want the seller to pay for all of those assessments in advance, which isn't the custom, which it says here. If neither box is checked, then option A will be deemed selected. So I'm just going over the contract, even though this is just how to write a contract on Transaction Desk. I'm going to go over the blanks as I see them. So flood zone and elevation certificate, if left blanks 20, I usually just leave this as 20, but it says buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice to the seller within 20 days if they determine there's an issue related to flood zone or elevation. So we move right along to the next blank, which is a property inspection and the right to cancel. So this is how many days the buyer has to inspect the home and reserves the right to cancel the contract due to inspection results. So in Florida, anything from 7 to 10 is kind of common. 10 is the more traditional, but we want our offer to look a little stronger, so we're going to use a shorter time period for inspection. 7 days. So this means the buyer has 7 days to have the home professionally inspected. And within those 7 days, if the inspection results are not satisfactory, the buyer can cancel the contract. The buyer can also try to renegotiate terms with the seller, because their leverage is if the seller is unwilling to renegotiate with them, they can cancel the contract within this inspection period. Be sure, if you are running up towards the end of your inspection period and you still want time to negotiate or do more inspections, that you extend this inspection period. Sometimes overlooked by agents. They think, oh, we've got a verbal understanding with the other agent. They know we're still investigating this issue. I'm sure they'll be fine. But remember, the contract is what governs the transaction. Okay, so we are moving right along. The next section is page 11 of 12, which has Addenda. So here we would check the box for each addenda that we are using or attaching to this contract. So each addenda is essentially an attachment to the contract. And these are all pre-written attachments that are available to us. Here's a list of them all. And we're going to be using on this home, because it's in a homeowners association, we're going to check this box, which means that we're including this addendum into the contract. And we're also going to check this box for FHA, because we decided the FHA addendum we would use. There's one for an appraisal contingency. You can use an appraisal contingency whether your transaction is financed or not financed. With FHA VA, it's written into the loan terms. So I don't normally click this appraisal contingency box. I have a set of clauses, which Transaction Desk allows you to do. Allows you to record clauses so you can use them repetitively in the future. So if I click on this clause, it'll give me some options for different clauses. And personal clauses are ones that I've written up that I can always just insert into the contract. So if I click on that, I have buyer clauses and seller clauses. So I'm clicking on the buyer clauses. And this first one is the one that I use. It has several terms, and I just delete whatever I don't need. So appraisals, liens, permits, closing costs, assistance. These are the 4 issues that I discuss in this clause. So I check that and I click OK. And so here are the terms. If the property fails to appraise at or above the purchase price, the buyer may cancel the contract and receive a full refund of the escrow deposit. So with that, I don't need an appraisal contingency rider, because it's in there. The buyer can cancel the contract if the home doesn't appraise. So you can, if I didn't want to use it, I can just delete it. The next one, seller shall clear any pending municipal lien and permit issues if any exist. So if at some point after the inspection period or during the inspection period, it's discovered that there's an unresolved permit related to the house, this will, we're asking the seller to resolve that before closing in this term. And by them accepting the offer, they're agreeing to this term. And because the contract's language does not obligate the seller to correct those issues. The next one is seller agrees to contribute blank towards buyer's total closing expense. If your buyer doesn't need it, delete that. It's going to make your offer seem a little weaker if your buyer needs closing cost assistance, especially in today's competitive market. So if your buyer does require closing cost assistance, in my scenario, I would delete this line and type in whatever it is that they're asking for. It might be $4,000. So for the sake of this example, I'm going to delete the closing cost contribution. The next one I have is security cameras shall convey if any exist. I'm just going to take out these two lines. So those are the additional terms that I'm including in this contract. Moving along, you see page 12 has the buyer names and seller names, and it has the realtor info. You can include addresses here, but it's not really customary. Most of the time you see those as blank. So I'm done with this as is contract portion. So I'm saving this by clicking File and Save. File, hover over File, then Save, and you see the Save button here. That just saves it in the system. If I wanted to save it as a PDF, I can click Save as a PDF. If I wanted to email it from here, I could email it to someone, but it wouldn't be to get a signature. It's just emailing it as a PDF to someone. I can print it from here. I can save and exit and go back to the wizard. Or I can get just this form signed by clicking Sign. But for now, we just want to save and exit. Now we're back to the wizard, and the next form that we're going to work on is this FHA Rider. Now we're on the FHA Rider. The seller and buyer's info has been imported, so it's all here. And this says Federal Housing Administration Rider, the first checkbox, check if applicable. Is this an FHA loan or is this a VA loan? If it's FHA, we check box number 3. If it's VA, we check box number 4. So this is an FHA. We're checking that box. And this is saying it's expressly agreed to that notwithstanding any other provisions of this contract, the purchaser shall be obligated to complete the purchase of the property described herein to or incur any penalty by forfeiture of earnest deposit otherwise unless the purchaser has been given in accordance with HUD, FHA, or VA requirements, a written statement by the FHA the Federal Housing Commissioner, Veterans Administration, or direct endorsement lender setting forth the appraised value of nothing less than X amount. So it's essentially saying that the buyer cannot lose their deposit if the home appraises for less than the contract price when the buyer is using an FHA loan. So I'm going to correct that statement. The buyer can't lose their deposit if the home appraises for less than what's typed into this box. So usually what you would type into this box is the purchase amount, purchase price. It should match. There are reasons why it wouldn't match, but it should match otherwise you're putting the buyer on the hook for whatever difference you have. Like if I put in here 370 and we're offering 375, the home appraises for 370, then the buyer would be on the hook to make up that $5,000 difference based on the way I wrote this up. So if the purpose of an appraisal contingency is to protect the buyer, and so writing the full price here protects the buyer to the fullest extent. Fees, purchaser shall pay all maximum loan expenses except tax service fee. I just always write 0 in here. It's not a VA, so we can disregard number 4. And here, that's all you have to fill out on this FHA document. All you have to fill out on the FHA document or VA document is check on whether it's FHA or VA, type in the appraisal contingency amount, which should match the purchase price. And I just leave this one as 0. Never had that be an issue. Now we're done with this one. I can save it like I did before, or I can just save and exit here and go back to the wizard, which I'll do. The next step in the process, this wire fraud document, I can open it up, but it doesn't have anything that I have to fill out. So it's just opening it up to review it. Save and exit. Okay, so we've got all the forms that we need to make this offer. Now the next step is I want to submit this to the buyer for signatures. So what I'm going to go, where I'm going now is Authentisign section of Transaction Desk. And to use Authentisign, you have to subscribe to the Authentisign service, which costs between $50 and $100 per year, which I've done, so it's going to work for me, and this is how it works. So from this page here, the next step for me would be to click on this pen, which takes me to the signings section of Transaction Desk. Okay, so now I'm in the signing section. These are my other transactions that are going on. I want to create a new signing process, so I'll create an Authentisign. I'll click the plus to add one. What's the signing name going to be? So we're going to associate this one with 7702 Sundial Lane example, and I'll name it the same thing, 7702 Sundial Lane example. Save. Okay, so now we're into the process here. Step one is include the details. So the details are, what's the signing name? We already have that. The participant order. Participant order means what's the order of the signers? Do I want one person to sign first? Do I want them to sign at the same time? So if you want it to go as fast as possible, you click on this simul sign, which means the signers will all get an email asking them to sign at the same time. So as soon as everyone's done signing, it's done. If you go sign in line, you'll have to add the signers, the order of which they'll be signing. So if I send it to John Doe first, Samantha Doe won't get a prompt to sign until John Doe is done signing. So if he didn't see it in his email until 24 hours later, it holds up everything. So I usually use simul sign. Advanced options. Do not set an expiration date. I usually don't have an expiration date. Here you can include an expiration date if you want. Do not send reminders. Sometimes I'll click this box which says send reminders in 4 hours and repeat every X amount of hours depending on what you choose here. So if the person hasn't signed, it'll send them reminders every 4 hours to sign. If I see that someone hasn't signed, I might reset this to send reminders, but I usually don't do that because usually I let them know they're getting it and they sign it. Authentisign ID. There's an ID associated with every Authentisign, and so you can choose where on the page that goes. Top left is how it always is. Hide signature keys on the signed documents. I never have that box checked. The next step is who will be the signers in this process. So these are the contacts associated with this transaction. The listing agent. So if I wanted to, I can include him as a CC, which means he doesn't sign anything, but he gets a copy of everything once it's done being signed. Myself, with an FHA Rider, the buyer's agent does have to sign it. So I will be a signer on this process. So I'm adding myself as a signer. John Doe, the buyer, of course, John is the signer. Samantha Doe, the buyer, she's a signer. And then the seller, we don't communicate with the seller unless it's a FSBO. So the listing agent's job is to communicate this offer to the seller. So we don't need the seller's email, and the seller won't be part of this signature process. And the last person in here, because it has the email address, is the title agent. It's up to you if you want to send the title agent a copy. Remember, this is just an offer, so title agents only want to see it when it's signed by everybody. So I wouldn't CC the I wouldn't CC the title agent. Okay, so once you're done here, quickly, I could add the listing agent to get a CC, but I'd rather not. And there's reasons why not. One is if I add this listing agent as a CC and the buyer sign, and it goes directly to the listing agent as soon as the buyer sign. What if the buyers call me back? What if there's a mistake that I notice after the fact that I want to fix? So I'd rather it come back to me. I can review it all, double check it for errors, and then send it to the listing agent. Sometimes if you're in a rush or super urgent, you might include the listing agent, but those are reasons why to and why not to. Okay, so I'm a signer. John Doe is a signer. Samantha Doe is a signer. Those are all of the participants in this Authentisign. I'm adding them by clicking add. So remember, if we had the sign in line, it would put us in order, but we're not doing sign in line. We're doing simu-sign, so it's going to send us all an email prompting us to sign at the same time. The next step after adding the participants is where you choose which documents they're going to sign. Just by clicking that, it pops up the 3 that are associated with this transaction. You've got the contract, you've got the FHA Rider, and the wire fraud. I want to include all 3 of those. So I click the top checkbox to highlight them all. Then I click add. That adds all 3 of those forms to this signing process. Then it asks me to double check the role. So do I want John Doe to be buyer number 1? Do I want Samantha Doe to be buyer number 2? It's asking me to double check that. So that's fine with me. I could change the order, but this is correct. So I'm going to leave it that way. And then for selling broker, we don't need anything else. So I'm just going to save that as it is. So that's good. But there are other forms. When you submit an offer, the listing agent would really appreciate it if you would include the signed seller's disclosure and the signed HOA disclosure. Remember, those are supposed to be part of this transaction also and part of this offer process. So to add that, we're going to go here, add documents. Well, first, before we add documents, let's get those documents. So here I'm going back to the MLS. Here's the house, Sundial Lane. I want to see the seller's disclosure and HOA. You should know that you can click on this paperclip icon to take you to the attachments. So you open that. Open that. All right, so here it is, HOA disclosure, seller's disclosure. I'll click on HOA disclosure. And I will create a new folder on my desktop called Sundial Example. Sundial Example. New folder named Sundial Example. Create, and I'm saving HOA disclosure in there. I'll just call it Sundial HOA disclosure. Save it. Seller's disclosure. Open that up. It brought me to the same folder, Sundial Example. So seller's disclosure, I'm just going to type in here, Sundial Example, seller's disclosure, save it. So now those 2 forms are saved in a folder on my desktop. Now I go back to Authentisign, and I want to add those documents to this signature process. The other document I would want to add into the signature process, because once this is all done, it's going to be a nice, neat package that's signed by the buyers, and it's going to go to the listing agent. So another document that I would add is the buyer's pre-approval letter. So that would also be saved in that folder, or a folder named after the buyers. But this is an imaginary scenario, so I don't have a pre-approval letter. But when I click on here, add documents to what we already have, click add documents, it gives me these examples. It gives me these options. Sundial, do I want to add forms from the Sundial transaction desk process? Do I want to select other forms that aren't associated to the transaction yet? Do I want to select forms from other transactions? Do I want to select forms from Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, or Box? or do I want to upload a file from my computer, which is what I want to do. But other options it gives you, you can upload documents by fax, you can upload documents by email, which I use every now and then. So I'm going to upload a file from my computer. I'm going to go to desktop. I'm going to go to sundial. Example, there's the folder. I'm going to highlight these two, which is the HOA disclosure and the seller's disclosure. If the pre-approval letter was here, I would highlight it also, and then I would click open. And now it's importing those documents into the signature process. So now we have the as-is contract, the FHA rider, the wire fraud, the seller's disclosure, the HOA disclosure, and we would have the buyer's pre-approval letter. So imagine that we had that as document number 6. I'm going to order these a little differently. So we have the as-is contract as number 1. I might slide the pre-approval letter as number 1 so the listing agent can see the buyer's pre-approval letter right away. After that, the as-is contract. Then anything that are FAR bar forms I would add next. So the FHA rider is a CR5X. It's a FAR bar rider. I would use that next. And this sundial HOA disclosure is going to be a FAR bar document. And then the rest are kind of extra documents. So the wire fraud is an EXP requirement, and the sundial example seller's disclosure, that should be included as well. So now we have them in the order that I like, and I will go to this design step. So in the design step, any forms that you've used from the transaction desk system, it's going to automatically assign the signature places for the buyer and the seller if we were dealing with the seller in the signature process. So here we have the contract between Ellen Palmer, there it is, John Doe, and Samantha. You can see all the letters in the and. By the way, if you get into transaction desk, you can change the font and colors and things like that if you wanted to. So here we are in this process, and it has everything that we've typed it up just as we typed it up. The places for the buyers to initial are already here. We don't have to add them ourselves. They're already automatically populated in there on every page, which is nice. Okay, so that is that way all the way through page 12 and the signature process. And on the FHA rider, it's already there, the buyer's initials in the appropriate place. And here you have the buyer's initials on the appropriate place. Now, what it doesn't have is broker. I just, it's customary to have the agent to sign here on behalf of the broker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign my signature to this broker place under the buyers section. So Daniel, I'm going to hit drag and drop, sign here, and I slide it over. When I slide it over, this is going to create a signature process for me, and it's also going to print my name in there. If I wanted to print my name underneath, just like it has here, I could use this box, signer name, and slide that over here, and it'll just put my name under here like it did with the others above. I could also use this markup tab here to type. So I would click markup, and then I would click this typing box. And wherever you click on the document, it's going to create a text box for you where you can type whatever you want. Just like that. You could also change the size of your typing. For example, 20. You can stretch the text box. You can turn this text box into whiteout. For example, let's just say Ellen Palmer. Let's say I spelled that wrong accidentally and I don't want to go back to transaction desk to fix it. I can go in here and say Ellen M. Palmer with 2 R's. And then, I could shrink this down so it's the right size. I click on this gear. I go from a transparent background to a white background. And then I slide this over that. And there we have it. I've just whited out where it said Ellen Palmer, and I've added this instead. And I could change the font size. I could make this box bigger if I wanted to white out a bigger area. It would do that. You won't see this blue dotted box when it's all done. So that's just a little tip that not everyone knows. So I'm just going to delete that because I don't really need it. So once we're done with that, now here we are. This is the HOA rider that the listing agent completed. We want to add our buyer names to this second line. So I could create a text box and type it in, which would be fine. Or what I normally do is I choose the buyer, like John Doe. Then I go to drag and drop. Then I choose this box, signer name, John Doe. Then I'll go to the other buyer, Samantha Doe. Click here, signer name, and slide it over, Samantha Doe. That's fine. The fact that one is bold and one isn't, that doesn't bother me. I'm fine with that. If you're particular about that, you can type it in yourself. Okay, so buyer's initials, Samantha Doe. We need her initials, so I'm going to slide it where it says initial here. I'm going to slide that there. This is a required initial. So the red initial here means it's required. The green initial, that's optional. So if I put this here, that would let the buyer decide if they want to initial there or not. But these are required initials, so I'm requiring the buyer to initial this spot. Next, John Doe, initial here. So now they both initial this document, which makes it part of the contract. Down here are places for them to sign. So we're still on the John Doe signer, so we're going to click sign here, put John Doe's name there. There's a date stamp here, which we can slide over to date. Then you can click to Samantha Doe, sign here, Samantha Doe, put the date stamp here, and that'll create the date on the time that they sign. So if I wanted to add anything in here, I could add it, but remember, if you change anything that the listing agent has done, it requires the buyer's initials and the seller's initials to make it an official change. Here's the wire fraud. It's already pre-populated in here. The buyer's name print, I noticed, is not, so I can do the buyer's name, Samantha Doe, and John Doe, slide over the signer name there. It's not that necessary because on all of these signature processes, it prints out the signer's name anyway, but if you want to be a little bit redundant or complete, you can do that. Okay, here we have the seller's disclosure, and this has all the information that the seller has disclosed about the home. And if this were the traditional seller's disclosure, it would have initial lines on the bottom of each page, but this is the Coldwell Banker seller's disclosure. And Coldwell Banker likes to write things their own way a lot of times, and so and tweak things their own way. So this one does not require the buyer and seller initials at the bottom of each page, which is a little different than what we're used to, but now you know why. And then at the last page, it has a signature process. So here's the seller section to sign, acknowledgement of the buyer, John Doe, sign here, print here, date here, Samantha Doe, sign here, print here, date here, and that's it. There's no more documents in here. So now we're all done. Click next. Okay, so now if I click send invitations, it's going to send it out for everyone to sign. So that's it, we're done. Or I can customize the email that gets sent out to everybody. So I could type something nice here, or you can just let it send out its own pre-populated text. So I'm just going to click on send invitation. It's probably going to give me an error because 2 of those email addresses are made up, but I'm sending it off. And now John Doe, Samantha Doe, maybe they exist somewhere. They're getting prompted to sign this contract totally out of the blue. And I will also get it in my email for me to sign. Once everybody signs, me as the selling agent, the buyer's agent, I'll get a copy of everything. And from there, I can send it over to the listing agent. So I hope this was helpful. Feel free to share this with anyone you know. And if you'd like more information, if you'd like to ask me questions, you can reach me at 407-375-9142 or teambetancourt.com. That's how you can reach me. Daniel@teambetancourt.com is my email address. So I appreciate you watching, and see you next time. Good luck on all your offers.